welcome you to the first event we're having in our new house or home. It's a small home, as you would say. We're a small apartment, but we try to put on big programs. So this is for those of you who are students. We have a list of courses still open next semester, and you can email me for if you have a question. My name is Paul Sham. I'm the executive director here, and we have a summer course on the Israeli-Palestinian experiment, a conflict resolution course taught jointly by a Palestinian and Israeli scholar. There's information on this sheet here. Today we're having a special lecture, as you know, by Professor Morad Al-Sana, who's been connected with the Institute for several years and has been teaching here for a while. He's a lawyer who has practiced in Israel and also gotten an SJD, a earned doctorate in law, not one of those JDs that you can get after 3 years. This is a real sweat and blood doctor from American University, with having written on the case of the Bedouin in Israel as an example of indigenous rights. And so Morad's been teaching courses on human rights in Israel and the Bedouin. He grew up in the Bedouin village of Lakia in the Negev, so he certainly knows about what he's talking. So I'm very glad to introduce my friend and colleague, Morad Al-Sana, who will talk about the Bedouin situation and land use in Israel.
Oh, thank you so much, Paul, and thank you all for coming here today to see this lecture. Actually, it's the subject we're going to talk about today is about the Bedouins in the Negev, but more we will focus in the recent events that happened in the village of Hiran, which was the destruction of one of the Bedouin villages in the Negev. So I took a session 2 months ago on how to present for a group of people. And they told me the first thing you have to present, to tell them what you are going to talk about. So you have to tell them the outline of your presentation. So we'll be talking about the destruction of the village of Hiran. Then we'll have a short presentation about the Bedouins in the Negev, an introduction, who are the Bedouins and where do they live and all these things for those who do not know. And then we'll talk a little bit also about the dispute over land between the Bedouin and the State of Israel, planning policy and plans for Bedouin evictions and relocations. Okay? I know that each one of these subjects is really huge, it's big, and we can talk about it for the whole course. We'll try to talk about the main issues on each one, and then hopefully we'll get 10 minutes for questions. Okay, I know it's a challenge. Okay, so let's hit the road. So the first thing about what brought the subject to be important today is the recent unprecedented violence in the Negev between the Bedouin community and the State of Israel, mainly between the Bedouins and the police officers. So in January this year, for the first time, the State of Israel tried to evict the whole Bedouin village called al-Hiran. Okay, it's al-Hiran. Al-Hiran depends if you are going to official Arabic or Ammi. Okay. So for the it's very important to notice here that in this event, it was for the first time the state trying to evict the whole village, to relocate the whole village. Usually, the state was trying to relocate or evict parts of these villages, a number of homes, a number of families, neighborhoods. But this is the first time the state decided to take over all the village and to evict it to different places. And it's the first time the state overuse of force in this village, okay? And also for the first time, the Bedouin citizen and the police officer were killed. So that's indicate a different kind of behavior between the Bedouins and the state, and different level of violence that start to happen in these cases. Okay, so the state government sent a large number of police officers to a small village, and with bulldozer they destroyed all the village and even different barns for animals and all these things. There was, as we said, overuse violence. This is MK Ayman Audi. He is the head of the Arab West Joint Arab West Knesset. And if a Knesset member happened to be hit in his face and get that amount of violence, so you can imagine about the other demonstrators and people who participated. Okay, so we're talking about the southern part of the state of Israel, okay, Beersheba, and here's the Negev, okay. So we're talking about the Bedouins in this area, okay, and then, so zooming the area, we'll see that this is the area, this is Beersheba city. I'm sorry for the quality of the slide, but this is the city of Beersheba, okay. This is moved when I touch it, okay, that's okay. So this is another zoom for a place called the Siag, which is the southern part of the Negev, and this is Beersheba city, and this is what they call it Siag, which is a triangle of a geographical area for the Bedouin villages. Here is the Rahat city, here is Kseifer next to Arad, and here is Dimona and Yeroham. This triangle, they call it the Siag. From the Hebrew word, Siag means the fence, which is the place that the government is planning to do, or have been planning for a long time, to designate it for the Bedouin settlement in the Negev, okay? And they try to bring all the Bedouin outside of this area to resettle in this area. So the Bedouins are not allowed to live or to establish any new other villages or homes outside of this area, okay? So if we would like to say something about the Bedouins, the Bedouins are the native people of the Negev. They have been living in the Negev, the southern part of the state of Israel, for a long time. They used to be a semi-nomadic tribal society. So this term is loaded also because many of the state officials, many times when they talk about the dispute over the land, they state that the Bedouins are nomadic people and they do not have any concept of land ownership, okay? So some scholars state the fact that the Bedouins are semi-nomadic, but frankly, if you look to the way of the Bedouins, how they live today in the Negev, nobody is nomadic anymore, okay? If you go and find for me a tent, I will give you nothing, okay?
Just for tourists, right?
Yeah, that's why I said nothing. I didn't want to put myself in problems, okay? So, the Bedouins also are part of the Arab-Palestinian minority, and also this is important to understand that in terms of identity and how they perceive and understand and see themselves. They, especially recent 20, 30 years, they start to see and to emphasize their Palestinian identity. Before the establishment of the State of Israel, the population was about between 60,000, 65 to 95,000 people. After the establishment of the State of Israel, only 11,000 remained in the State of Israel. That means about 80% of the Bedouin population were left or were evicted. Okay, also this term is disputed in many places. Okay, so the Bedouin today, from the 11,000 that they remained in 1948, we have today about 200,000 people. Okay, so they live in 17 recognized villages. Okay, so usually or traditionally, or many people who continue to say that there are 7 recognized villages. Okay, but today, between the year 2090, between the years 1996 until 2005, the state recognized additional 10 villages. So we have today about 17 recognized villages. The newly recognized villages are still in terms of planning and construction. Some of them there are plans and they started to build their homes. But the idea here that they are starting to get the official recognition, and they are not practicing any more a massive home demolition like the unrecognized villages. That's why it's important. Okay, so Bedouin in the Negev generally live in a very poor conditions. Okay, and when we say poor condition, there is a difference between poverty and poverty also. While the Bedouin usually live under poor conditions, those who live in the unrecognized villages, okay, live even in a very desperate and harsh living conditions. It's not only because of the poverty itself, but because they are subject to different policies from the state and acts mainly about the deprivation of their basic rights. When we say deprivation of basic rights, that means these people do not have high schools. These people do not have running water in their homes until today. Well, 2017, people do not have running water in their homes. Okay, that means they don't have sewage system. They don't have roads, okay, paved road, I mean, and they don't have electricity. Then they don't have any kind of internet connection or these things. So it's very hard. They don't have clinics for health services, with some 2 or 3 exceptions. That these health clinics were established by order of the Supreme Court after several civil society organizations submitted petition to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ordered the government to establish health clinics in these things. Okay. In terms of other policies, they are subject also to harsh policies resulting to home demolition. Home demolition is a really very important problem for the Bedouins that resulted into relocation and the confiscation of their land. So these 3 things also connected. We'll see how later on. Okay. So this is a picture from a house demolition for one of the houses. Okay, and the state used to practice because there is a dispute over the land of the Bedouins. The dispute, that means the Bedouins continue to claim that this land is theirs, and the state claims that this land is not theirs. So there is a huge dispute between the two. The Bedouin continue to hold physically or to possess some of these lands and control who gonna use these lands. So because they possess these lands, they cultivate the lands, and after they cultivate the land, sometimes the government come and destroy these crops. The government used to destroy it with poison by airplanes, agricultural airplanes. We submitted a petition to the Supreme Court also claiming that this destruction of the crops is not, or causing severe health problems for people and for the animals. So the Supreme Court prevented or forbidden the government to destroy the Bedouins' crops by using this kind of poison called Roundup. Okay, but the government today is trying to use other means of how to destroy the Bedouins' crops by tractors and different means. Okay, here's the three main elements for the Bedouin problem in the Negev today is land dispute, planning policy, and the third one is the eviction and the relocation issue. And they all connected each to other. You cannot talk about the planning policy ignoring the land dispute because the main problems or the major problems in the land policy are related to the land dispute and all the policy that for the Bedouin evictions and all these confrontations between the Bedouins and the government offices that even sometimes there are decisions by court for some people to leave a place, but the Bedouin refuse to leave because they believe that this land is there and sitting there is the only way to defend their rights on these lands. Okay. So first of all, the Bedouin land issue is, as I said, is the conflict over the ownership of the Bedouin land. This conflict is the result of the refusal of the state to recognize Bedouin land rights. And we are talking about two legal norms here, two sets of laws. You are talking in the one hand, the government claiming that this is not Bedouin land because of the based on the modern law of the state of Israel. Okay, the Bedouins continue to hold and to state that this is their land, relying on their traditional and customary law. So there are two levels of law, and this is one of the sources that makes this problem is very a problem. Okay, the main reason for this is the need for the state to and this is in terms of the legal level, but in terms of the practical level, there are also a conflict between the Bedouins and the state because everybody wants to use the land for his needs. The Bedouins themselves for their villages, for their agriculture, for their cultural needs, they need the land, and the state also needs the land for settlements, for new immigrants and all these things. Okay?
What's the meaning of the word Mawat land?
Mm-hmm. So, Mawat land is, when the Bedouins went to the Mawat, is like a category of land ownership. Okay? Mawat from the word maut, mat, dead. That means dead lands. Okay? Based on the Ottoman law, the Ottoman law divided the land to 5 categories: mulk, miri, like private and public and all these things. Mawat is one of these categories. Mawat is a land that used to be far from city, and usually nobody owned these lands. That's in the old history. Okay? But if you want to own this land, you have to prove what we call revival, which means in Arabic إحياء الموات, أحياء موات in Hebrew. Okay? And the revival is through working the land, cultivating the land, using the land. You have to use the land for at least 3 years, and to prove that you have been using the land since then, not to stop using it. The moment you stop using the land before you register it in your name, then you lose it. Okay? The Bedouins traditionally own these lands based on their customary law. They believe that they are Bedouins and they know how to protect their lands. They don't need the governments, they don't need the Ottomans, they didn't need the British mandate, and they at the beginning, at the start of after 1948, they believe that also we survived the Ottomans, we survived the British, we'll survive Israel also. So they didn't register their lands and they stayed relying on their customary law. And really, if you go to the Negev between the tribes today, if I own some land, or my land is based on my customary law, and the Bedouin customary law, nobody will be able to touch this land. Okay, nobody will, even if you buy it from the government and you pay 200,000 shekels for a dunam, which is about quarter acre. If you come to use it, I will tell you, Yoram, this is my land. Okay, you can go back to the government of Israel and take your money back, but you cannot use it. And people usually respect this law, and they don't go to use other people's land. Okay, so this is also part of the problem, because if one tribe owns half of the village, and the government try to sell building lots for people who are outside of this tribe,
So the members of the tribe will prevent these people to come use these lands. So that's also causing a conflict between the official legal system of the state and the customary legal system for the Bedouin themselves. Okay? So all these elements come together to make the issue more difficult and hard to solve. Okay? So as we said, the other element is the lack of registration of the land, because Israel, according to the land law in Israel today, in order to prove your rights on land, you have to show registration. You have to show title deed for this land. Bedouins do not have any kind of these documents because they relied on their customary.
Can I ask a question, maybe just a clarification, because I think maybe you misstated this. The need of the state for land for its settlement project, you don't mean the need, you mean the plan of the state. I mean, the state doesn't need the specific land, it's you mean that they're planning to take over the land, and that's for settlement. When you mean settlement, Jewish only settlement, right?
Yeah.
Because in this particular case, the Bedouin asked to be, or at least the MKs asked for the Bedouins to be incorporated into the new settlement, which was projected, correct?
Right. Yeah. It's not
So that's not really, just to clarify that.
Yeah, that's true. The main conflict is that the government continue to ask to get some of the Bedouin lands for the settlements, for the Jewish settlement established of Jewish towns, like the example of Am al-Hiran. Am al-Hiran is a Bedouin town that has been there since the 50s, okay, and now is not only the government is trying to relocate them because there are like a military base or the zone is not set for inhabitants, as we say, civil building and all these things, but because the government is trying to build a different town for the Jewish population, which the Bedouins see it as a blatant example for discrimination between citizens. Okay, we are Bedouin, we are citizens of the state of Israel, and you are trying to move us or to evict us from our village in order to bring a Jewish community from different places and to resettle them. That's why the case of Am al-Hiran is really very difficult and difficult one. Okay. So the land dispute is a very old one between the state of Israel and the Bedouins. Since the establishment of the state started to dispossess the Bedouin lands. And here it's like just showing that on all levels the state were able, put plans to dispossess Bedouin lands. For example, in the executive level, I divided them like this: in the executive level, in the legislative level, and in the judicial one. Okay, so if you go to the executive level, we talk about the first acts of the evictions of the Bedouins from their traditional land after the 48 until the 70s. It was very easy for the state to evict some people, to displace from place to place, and to disconnect them from their traditional land. That was very important for the country to control the land, and also for future legal procedures that rely on the possession of the land. If you possess the land, that means you are sitting physically on the land, then you continue to hold on some legal rights. But if you are not sitting there and you are left or you were evicted, okay, then even these little legal rights, you don't possess them, okay? Then on the, again, this is the Siag area, which is the place that the government in the 45, between 45 and 1052, evicted all the Bedouins and forced them to live in this Siag. This is very common concept when we talk about the Bedouin land. So in the legislative level, there were also several laws that the state enacted in order to dispossess these Bedouin lands. The very famous one is the Land Settlement Ordinance that was enacted in 1969. That ordinance declared all the Bedouin lands as disputed land and asked all the Bedouin to come and to submit what we call land settlement claims, okay, like lawsuits in order for the government to recognize their lands. the important things that the ordinance introduced, so it's created a special system with a special process of land title settlement that brought about major land disposition. But the other thing, it created a new reality which introduced a new regime for land disposition. The first thing in this regime is based on the disregard of the Bedouin traditional land rights, what we said about their customary law that recognize their land rights. This ordinance did not recognize any of these customary laws. But the other thing also, it's transferred the status of the Bedouin, and this is a legal element. That means it transferred the status of the Bedouin from owner of the land to only claimants. And legally, as a lawyer, we look at this in different. So if you are owner of the land, that means you are really owner of the land. But if I tell you you are not owner, go submit a claim, then you have to go through a whole long legal process that proved to be not successful for the Bedouins. None of the Bedouins were able to get their land recognized in the courts of Israel. Okay, this is another land that was enacted in the 80s and also has some implementation. It's called the Negev Land Acquisition, the peace treaty in the 1979. Yes.
Are the recognized towns all in the SIAG? The 17 recognized towns, are they in that SIAG, all 17? And are the 35 unrecognized all outside of it? Or
No,
some of them inside?
both. This triangle, the SIAG area, includes both the recognized and the unrecognized villages. So traditionally we have the 7 recognized villages, recently also another 10, so we have now 17 recognized villages, and also the 35 unrecognized villages, they are in the SIAG. Because
So everything's in the SIAG?
everything is in the SIAG area, so
that's where the dispute is
Right.
only within that area?
right, all
And-
of it in this area.
Okay. And was that, before these land laws, was that the traditional area for them, or were they pushed into that area?
It's both situations are correct. Some of the people whose land outside of the SIAG area were pushed in the SIAG area, so they are living in places that are not their traditional lands, but their traditional lands outside of the SIAG area. Like for example, Tarabin, their lands outside, but they are living next to home, and it's not their land, but the government in the 1950 brought them there and asked them, you sit here, okay, by order, okay? And the other thing is, like, some people sit on their lands within the SIAG area itself. For example, tribes for Asana, for themselves, and then Asad,
Right.
they are sitting on their traditional land in this area.
And the picture of the airplane you showed spraying crops to kill them, is that inside the SIAG or outside?
Yes, inside the SIAG.
How big is the,
Yes, please.
Well, but, is it correct that up until 67, they were under military rule?
Yeah, until 66.
66,
Right.
military rule. Siyat, does that mean there was a fence?
SIAG is a Hebrew word for...
Yeah, but does that mean that there actually was a fence?
No, there is no physical fence.
And it's not, and they were not before.
There
66
never
or-
have been any kind of
Okay.
fence. There's no fence actually, but they call it metaphorically because
Okay.
they want this area to be designated, the only area to be designated for the Bedouin settlements.
And are there disputes between different tribes, or only between the tribes and the state?
It's very rare. There are some, but it's very rare. But really, nobody cares about these things because it's not that common or important. And usually, when there is a dispute between tribes, they go to the Bedouin customary law, and the Bedouins go to their law, and they solve these problems. I have seen several cases, and the Bedouins were able to solve the conflict or any kind of dispute, and to define the borders between the two peoples.
That was
How-
the question I had about the dispute being some Bedouins were relocated into an area that was already owned by another tribe.
Yeah, there are
So was
several
that,
examples.
did that create a problem?
Yeah. It's at the beginning it didn't, because people were under the military regime between 1949 until 66, And so people did not really try to evict, Bedouin did not try to evict other Bedouins, okay? Because they knew that sitting in the land does not give you any rights, especially because you know that it's my land and you acknowledge that. And usually people who are trying to sit in other people's land, they acknowledge that it is not their land and they are living here because they were forced to came here, okay? So, and the main dispute between on Bedouins' land, between the Bedouins and the state of Israel, because Bedouins are not trying to take other Bedouins' land, but the state trying to take their land and sometimes designate it for forests, for military zones, for Jewish settlements, and sometimes for nothing. Yes.
How big is the Siag area, if you know, in comparison with the whole Negev?
I can't tell from the top of my mind, but I can tell that the Bedouin land claims, that means the land that the Bedouin is trying to claim and to get it from the government, to ask the government to recognize, are about between 2 to 3% of the Negev lands. While the Bedouin themselves constitute about 25% of the population of the Negev. So if we talk about what we call in Hebrew tzedek chalukati,
Distributive justice.
distributive justice, then this work in favor of the Bedouins. Okay? Yes.
Just as a background issue, the rise in population, the rise in Bedouin population.
The what?
The rise in population.
The rise in
You said
population.
11,000 to
Yes.
200,000.
Right.
Is that natural growth? Is that immigration?
Natural growth.
It's natural growth.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but you have, this is a very important question because traditionally Bedouin as a tribal society that relied many times in the male dominancy in the tribe, and the male who is going, for example, to traditionally they used to fight, to cultivate the land, to do a lot of things, and they used to have like polygamy is a problem also, but the rate of birth today in the Negev is reducing drastically. So traditionally, the average family among the Bedouin families used to be between 9 to 8 or 7, like this, or 10 sometimes. Today, you will see among all the young couples like 4, 3. So there is really a change, especially because many of the young couples start to go to university and to work, and especially girls, okay? In the recognized villages, for example, all the people, and especially the girls, get the chance to go to high schools, and when they go to high school and they push them to go to the university and start to work, a girl or a woman will change her life, including her birth rate. While in the unrecognized villages where there is no high school, still the birth rate is higher, and so the reality is like it's not an easy one, it's complex.
Yeah, just very quickly, because I think there was a point here about the Siaj area and how big it is. You can think about it as a radius of west, east, and south of about 30 miles, 25 miles from Beersheba. But most importantly, it was created in the middle of the Negev for a purpose, and that is to prevent demographic connection between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip via the Bedouins in the Negev.
And Egypt.
And Egypt, yeah.
So as we said, we talked about the legislative, on the judicial level also. The third one, Bedouin took their case to the Supreme Court of Israel, won this case called the Hawashla case, and the Supreme Court examined the Bedouin land claims. And also, unfortunately, in the Supreme Court found or supported found that the Bedouin land is a Mawat land. That means the Bedouin do not have any kind of rights in these things, and for the Bedouins, unless you revive the Mawat land, you will not be able to buy any kind of rights in these lands. And it's really very hard to prove that you revive these lands, because the revival is a very difficult, needs a very difficult requirements. And also you talk about rights since the 1921. So the majority of the witness and the people who can prove revival of lands passed away. So it's very difficult one. So the Al-Hawashli decision is very important. The Supreme Court, as we said, it described how the conflict with what the Bedouins claims were that they owned the land under the Ottoman and the British and then their customary law, and the government refused to accept any of these arguments and only accept the argument that the land was Mawat. And after Al-Hawashli drew the legal precedent in this field, all the Bedouin cases in courts relied on this precedent, and they all failed. No one case was able to successfully prove Bedouin land rights. Yes, Stefan.
So is this similar to, I guess, like how the Native Americans here have like our government, like with for the 17 recognized villages, do they have their own like laws inside? Like out here for Native Americans, you can't anything on a reservation.
Right.
Like it would be completely different. Like it would be illegal, like federally, but since they own that area.
Yes, I did some comparative study about the indigenous people's land rights. We found, and many other scholars like me, for example, Oren Yiftakhel and Sandy Kidar from Haifa University, they found similarities between the way the Supreme Courts perceived the Bedouin land rights and countries, colonial countries like the United States, especially Australia, okay? And based on these lines, they're trying to provide or suggest a way how to recognize the Bedouin land rights and to do like kind of settlements between the Bedouins and the government in order to let the Bedouins be able to use their lands or part of it at least, and the government use other part. But in the current situation, nobody is able to use the land. That means especially lands that are within the Bedouin villages or the Bedouin territories. So the government cannot sell it for other Bedouin or non-Bedouin people to use it. At the same time, when the Bedouin try to use it, the government, as we said, if they build houses, it destroy them. If they use it for agriculture, it destroy their crops and all these things. So the land sits without any use, and this is a waste of very important thing. Also in the planning level went based on the land right dispute, okay? So the state applied in planning and urbanization policies over the Bedouin and prevent any kind of expansion outside of the Siyaj area. So the Bedouins were designated for the Siyaj area and they were not allowed to live there. Planning and urbanization subjected the ultimate goal of land disposition. That means in every time they start to try to plan, for example, for the Bedouin rights or the Bedouin villages or towns, they tried all the time to plan, first of all, in Bedouin land, not in government land. The second thing is try to make the Bedouin towns and villages as small as possible in order to get the other lands for mainly Jewish settlements and building towns and military bases in the Negev, okay? So the example that we used in the Supreme Court in one of our cases is 7 versus 127. So since the until 1992, the state recognized only 7 towns for the whole Bedouin population in the Negev. In contrast, on comparison, the state recognized about 127 towns for the Jewish communities in the Negev. So you can see the differences between the two things, okay? I put here, in order to be fair with my audience, so the population of the Bedouins are not similar to the Jewish population in the Negev. So the Bedouins are only 2,000, about 2,000, okay? And the number, the Jewish is about 350,000. The number here also is disputed, and that's because mainly the governmental offices do not recognize the Bedouin who live in the unrecognized villages, so they don't know how many of them. They don't put them in the census system, and nobody knows how many people are there or how many houses. So you go to the Ministry of Interior, you'll find different numbers. You go to the other government office, they give you different numbers, and the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, also have their numbers and all these things.
Are the 127 towns for Jewish communities all in the CIAC?
No, in the Negev.
Negev.
Well, so that I don't understand how to compare. You told me all 17 of the Bedouin towns are in the CIAC.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
So
not
the others
much.
could be very far away, right?
Right. It's not mathematics here. It's okay. It's
I just I count the people.
yeah.
in the
So
lot.
if you look
Jewish
to
towns
the
can be inside and outside the city.
if you look to the Negev, okay, the Negev is about third of the state of Israel. It's a huge, it's a large place. And in the Negev, since the 1948, the state recognized, not only recognized, the state actually established, okay, 127. This is old numbers, so maybe today it's more even, okay? And for the Bedouins, it recognized only 7. And the difference also, you can see, we look to these numbers from different perspective. While for the Jewish settlements, the state and towns, the state established these ones from the scratch. But for the Bedouins, many times if you hear that they established a town for the Bedouins, that's not true. That's just for the Bedouins, usually they recognize an existing village, okay, and they plan it or they give the building permit and start to build these things. So also in this level there is.
And of the 127, how many are inside the CIAC?
I don't know.
Many?
Many.
No, he's
Not
asking
so
about
many.
Jewish.
Jewish. I cannot tell because we went to the Negev area and we counted in the Negev area. We didn't count in the CIAC, okay? We count in the Negev area, okay? So additional villages for the Bedouin in order to resettle them, and between the years 2000 to 2014 the state recognized another 9 villages for the same times. For the first time they recognized a new town called Tarabin. Tarabin, the only Bedouin village that was not recognized only but established for the Bedouins. All the other ones and the reason was because they evicted the village from next to Omer with the support and the request for Pini Badash because they wanted to expand the Omer, the Jewish city there, and to get the land next to the city for these Jewish people, rich actually community in the Negev, and they want to get rid of the Tarabin. That's why they gave them a different place next to Rahat in the western side of the Negev. Okay. So despite these things, the Bedouins continue to refuse to relocate or move from their traditional villages, mainly because Bedouins they prefer to continue to live in their traditional villages. But the other thing is the Bedouin also oppose the sedentarization plan because it confiscated their lands, usually, and destroy their cultural economy. When we are talking about cultural economy, many of the Bedouin continue to rely on livestock and herding as their traditional livelihood. Okay, so the moment they move from these places to the recognized towns and they give them only a building lot, they lose their jobs, they lose their income, and they become in a moment like unemployed, very poor people, and all these things. These things the government does not take into consideration in the new established villages, and this is also one of the main reasons for people who are in the recognized towns. They tell the people in the unrecognized villages, don't go to the recognized one. They tell them why? Because if you go to the recognized one, you will lose your land, you will lose your livestock, and you will lose your income. You will be like living from Bituach Leumi, the national insurance, and that's it. And it's very hard for people who have been practicing agriculture and different way of life, and suddenly to go to look for a job in the IT or in the universities. It's almost impossible. You want to ask?
So these people, I mean, as they are citizens, they are obviously legally allowed to move freely throughout the state of Israel.
Right.
And they can also take up residence anywhere in the state of Israel.
Yes.
How many take advantage of that? So is there's a there's a political agenda that drives them to stay within their community. Is that right? I mean, is that because you mentioned that there are first of all women who attend high schools, go to university, and so to go to university they have to go somewhere else. Is that a sizable development that people move out of the Bedouin community and into maybe an urban Arab Palestinian community in other parts of Israel, or is that not happening?
It's not happening. There is no phenomena like this. Maybe I can see 1 or 2 or 3 people that I know they moved for different reasons, but not because they think that moving to other places is better. But yeah,
It's remarkable.
this is we do not have a phenomena like this that people. And I remember once I represented a group of people who were under threat of their houses to be demolished. And there were like about the whole village of Al Hawashli. It's like about 3,000 people, and the government brought them to the court in order to evict them from their place. So they told the government, we don't have any other place to go to. If you remove us from here, give us different place to go to. So the government said that they can come to live in Beersheba, which is like for somebody who does not understand the reality who says these things. They cannot live in Beersheba, they will not let them in the Beersheba, and they will not be able to live in Beersheba.
So-
It's totally different culture.
So the reality is different. They may legally be able to move to other places in Israel, but they would not, I mean, culturally, socially, they would not be able to make a living in another part of
And
Israel.
also practically, if you are looking at 200,000 people, let's say 100,000 people who live in the unrecognized village, you cannot move 100,000 and even less 50,000 from these unrecognized villages to a city like Beersheba. The city will not be able to host them. There will be no places like in terms of housing, in terms of services and all these things. It's not practical. So people find it very difficult for the Bedouin themselves in order to just to show how it's difficult to move from place to place. If I belong to tribe A and I come to live in your land as a tribe B, for me it's very difficult because I will be like somebody who living on your land and you will be like my boss. So you will be somebody who is giving me, like making for me a favor, letting me live. And these things, that's why many Bedouin do not want to go to live in other Bedouins' land. They prefer to go to Bedouin land that is designated state land. That means it doesn't belong to other Bedouins. Because if I go to live in other Bedouins' land, I declare war on them or they declare war on me. And for Bedouins, it's very hard because some people might be killed during these things. So nobody wants to.
Remind us how
What's
many,
that?
sorry, go ahead.
What's the percentage of Bedouins who serve in the army?
It's very low. I do not have official numbers, but I just read in different places in the newspaper.
Is it
it's-
only tribes? Because I mean, the people who have agreed to be drafted within the Bedouin.
Right.
There's
Yeah,
just,
it's
is that-
voluntary. It's not.
How many tribes? Just a few tribes who have agreed to do that, or where are they concentrated? Anyone who knows this, because I know there is a
Decline.
what the percent. Pardon
There's a
me.
huge decline, but I don't know the figures.
But
There's
yeah.
a huge
Yeah,
decline.
yeah.
of-
The number
of-
is
of
declining,
volunteers.
especially because of this
Sure.
conflict over these things. The
Uh-huh.
Bedouins. It's not only the number of Bedouins who drafted in the army is declining because of these.
But there was an
Yeah.
agreement, a formal agreement between the state and certain tribes to be drafted, not just who you know, decide to join the army. So what happened to that?
There has never been something like obligatory in the Bedouins like the Druze, for example. Okay, they are not.
It was just an
drafted.
understanding.
Just an
Those are not
understanding that
obligatory.
Bedouins, for example,
No,
the
no.
sheikh, if he, for example, the tribal leader, if he, for example, encourage the youth to go to the army, many of them will go, okay? But today, even the status of the sheikh is declining because of the urbanizations and changes in social structure. So Bedouin society, okay, especially those who move to the recognized towns, are moving toward what we call Western individualism. Okay, that means I care about myself. I would like to have my own home, to send my kids to school and then to the university, and that's it. While people who continue to live in the tribal traditions, especially in the unrecognized villages, is continue to hold more about their traditions and their tribal order. But that doesn't mean that all the people who moved to the recognized towns or they left or they ignored their tribal. So tribal order and customary law, Bedouin customary law, which we call in Arabic al-Qanun al-Asha'iri, is still very strong among Bedouins.
How many Bedouins live outside the Negev, in Ramle, in the Galilee?
People who live in the Ramle are really those who left there in the 60s looking for jobs, especially in agriculture. So their numbers are really small, and some of them just starting to come back to the Negev, okay, but not in like massive numbers, but some of them come back, especially because some of them they do have lands in the Negev, so they want to settle in the Negev. There are other Bedouins in the southern part, in the northern part of the state of Israel, but they do not have any connection with the Bedouins in the Negev, and also they don't have the same kind of problems and conflict with the state like the Bedouins in the Negev.
What is the main economy based on of the Bedouin besides shepherding and what?
Today, many of them work in services. Okay, we have many people who work, for example, as educators, teachers, and especially for women, to be a teacher within the villages, like it's very acceptable in the Bedouin society, because they see her not traveling, not going far, and at the same time she work and earn money for her family. But many work in some agriculture. Some of them as truck drivers and specific type in constructions like drivers of heavy machines and all these things. It's not like okay, so that's there is no like one field that I can tell that the Bedouin do have an income. And you have to understand that until the 70s and the 80s, not many people, Bedouin people went to higher education, especially high schools. For example, I went to high school in Khifa, because in my village we did not have a high school, okay, because it used to be unrecognized. So I had to travel. 3 hours to Khifa to rent an apartment and to live with my friends there. It was hard. And also, it's not easy for many Bedouin parents to do this, because first of all, Bedouins are a very poor society. We don't have any kind of inheritance. We don't have any kind of money. So you're born naked and you grow up naked and you start to start your life from the scratch. So that's why we don't have like a phenomena of rich people who, for example, donate to the establishment of the schools or NGOs or all these things. It's a society that's in a very unique and special transitional situation today. And it changed. That means maybe I will tell you something about the Bedouins. You go to somebody else from Al-Azaz, the tribe, he will tell you, all this is not true. So they are in the Negev, in Lakia, they are Ashkenazis. Okay? They are not Bedouin. They are not real Bedouins. Okay, so some people
I
choose
have
to.
another question about the role of the religion. The role of the religion.
The role of the
in
religion, yeah.
In the tribe. There are no mosques in the unestablished villages, or are they?
Oh, we have so many mosques. So in the 80s, this is very important also, because traditionally the Bedouins didn't care about religion. Okay, but don't tell anybody. Okay. So they were not like religious people or these things. But today, after the 80s, we start to see that the Islamic movement growing in Israel in general and in the Negev especially. Okay. So many people start to resort to these political parties, the Islamic political party, and to get affiliated with it, because it's much more easy for me to be affiliated with the Islamic political party than to go to the Communist Party, because it's mainly due to some kind of educational level among the Bedouin themselves, okay? For example, I compare myself all the time. When I went to Khifa with the high school, all my peers were like very aware about the politics. They were like everybody who was who want to be like with the Communist Party or different parties. For myself, I didn't know anything about the politics, okay? So in the Negev, politics during that time was very weak. But today it's getting much more stronger, and people now have more awareness about the situation, and also the identity of the Bedouin themselves is shifting from like, you will see there was two recent research that I'm aware of, okay? One was done in the maybe 97, and one was just done recently by Dr. Hani Bawad. He did some doctorate research about the changes in the Bedouins' identity definition, how they see themselves. And he showed that more Bedouins define themselves as Palestinians today as a result of this conflict. Many Bedouins start to see themselves that the government or the state do not want to recognize me as an equal citizen. There were stories, for example, one guy who was serving in the army, and when he went home, he found that they destroyed his home. Okay? So he was like crazy. He said, I'm trying to do all these things, and when I go back, my government, my country destroyed my home. So these examples, and example for Amal Hiran also, and many of these harsh policies and acts of house demolition against the Bedouins, they do not do any better for the Bedouin community in the Negev. The Bedouin used to be one of the communities that have the best kind of coexistence with the Jewish environment in the Negev, and until today, many social relations between the Bedouins and their Jewish neighbors in the Negev, like different than any other places, but all these things like house demolition, village evictions, and the recent one killing of people during the house demolition, these things are just turning the Bedouins against the states and trying to, especially for kids and youth who are trying to define themselves as an Israeli today, is not easy for them to do that. Many of them, especially for the political environment today, is going or shifting the definitions. These things shift toward to define themselves as Muslims, as some of them even as Bedouins, some of them as Arab, and some of them are Palestinians. And this is very, very important for the policymakers in the state of Israel to start to look at the results of these things.
Why did some compromise plans like the one of Begin and others fail? Or I guess you want to get to that later.
Yeah, how long time we have? So I will move to the important things, okay?
It's 1:35 now.
So,
That's what we have.
10 more minutes.
Okay.
and then we'll
Yeah,
have
so-
the question.
So the important things is that the government was aware all the time for the problem of the Negev and the unrecognized villages and the land. So in 2003, the government put the first plan to solve these issues. In 2005, also the government put another plan for the Negev development called the National Strategic Plan for the Development of the Negev. It's known more by the name of Negev 15, in Hebrew, תוכנית לאומית אסטרטגית לפיתוח הנגב. One of the main goals of the plan to continue to be the enforcement of the planning laws. The enforcement of the planning laws for the Bedouins means the continuation of their house demolition, okay? Because in the same time, they claim that there is about 40,000 illegal houses, but all these 40,000 illegal houses are in the unrecognized villages, and these people usually, they don't have any other places to go to. So you cannot come and destroy people's houses if you don't give him alternatives. Even based on the legal, the abstract legal theory in Israel, you cannot destroy people's houses if you do not give him alternative. Because the basic law of Israel, which is the constitution, states that if a person do not have house that is in violation of his basic right. Okay, so all these things work. So after that plan, the government didn't know exactly how to solve these three problems. What we say, the land issue and the recognition of their villages and the house demolition. So it's established a committee called Goldberg Committee. The Goldberg Committee was a committee that set in order to give advice, okay, and to set a plan how to solve these policies. Okay, that was in 2007. It suggested. So the government also asked the committee to issue recommendations on policies to regulate the Bedouin settlements, including proposals for new legislation. That means to enact a law. That's what we're gonna see, a proper situation, okay, proper law, a proper plan. The Goldberg Committee issued a report. The report, frankly, in short, the report did not suggest any major changes for the Bedouin problem, especially in the three main issues: the recognition of their land, the recognition of their villages, and the demolition of their house. Instead, it focused on enforcement of the building and planning law, i.e. evicting the Bedouin from their villages and settling them in a new town, which is not solving the problem, and continue to try to evict the Bedouins from their villages. Okay, then the Goldberg report came to a new committee called Proper Plan. They draw the committee put what we say Proper Plan. The Proper Plan is a plan how to apply the recommendation on the Negev, on the Bedouins in the Negev. So that's what caused a lot of confrontations between the Bedouins and the government. And the first time we see pictures like these things that remind us of the Intifada. It's not the pictures from Bedouins' peaceful demonstrations in the state of Israel. That's also another change, another level of change in the relationship between the Bedouins and the state of Israel. Okay, so in 2000 time, after the Goldberg report was issued, the government established another committee headed by Ehud Praver to prepare a plan for the implementation of the Goldberg recommendations. Okay, the government asked the committee to suggest recommendations on three main issues: land settlements, planning of Bedouin towns, and enforcement of the law in regard to the Bedouin illegal houses, again, house demolition. So all these committees were like politically driven, especially in this government, and that's why they were not able to hear what the Bedouins are trying to tell the government. Okay, from the Bedouin perspective, the Proper Plan is the government plan to evict the population of 35 unrecognized villages, destroy their homes, businesses, and concentrate them into other villages, which are the recognized villages. That is not only destroying your house and taking your land and evicting you, but also you will become what we call internal displaced. That means internal refugee in different Bedouin villages. May 23rd, the committee submitted recommendations in a report known as the Proper Report. Another report states that the goal of the plan is to bring better integration of the Bedouin society and reduce the economic and the social gaps between the Bedouin and the Jewish population in the Negev, which is very good, okay? But the Bedouin leadership insists that this is not a development nor integration plan, but a concentration and land confiscation. They discovered that the plan deals mainly on these two issues: land and concentration. That means land confiscation and the concentration of Bedouin in different villages. In regard to the land, it suggests that depriving the Bedouins from their land with respect to the planning arrangement for the Bedouin settlements, the recognition of Bedouin villages. The report insists on destroying them, rejecting the recognition of any of these villages. And from here we'll go back to the where we started, which they started with the village of Amal Hiran. They start to evict the village, destroy the houses, and that's what happened in Amal Hiran. So if they continue to do this thing, we don't know where we're gonna end up. Okay, and that's the end of it. Thank you so much. for being so patient.
So you have all these unrecognized villages.
Yes.
Why doesn't the state just let people stay there?
Oh, as I said, we have like two elements for this question. The first one, the legal element, and the other one is the what we call the ideological, the political element. The legal element, the government claims that these are unplanned places. That means the land is not designated for civilian population.
Right, but you can change the law. What about
Exactly.
the political part?
They did change it in different things. And the other one is the political one, that the politics and the government, especially this government, is trying to, as I said, concentrate the Bedouins in small lands in order to save the lands for different reasons and for different populations, especially for Jewish settlements. And this is
The Negev is big.
exactly. And, that's why it doesn't make sense.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Is there a Bedouin plan that they, with various people's help, like maybe yourself, have proposed to counter, to address the issues? Because we
Yes,
just hear
definitely.
about the government plan, but not the
Yeah,
Bedouin
of course,
plan.
there are several plans, but the one we call the alternative plan that was established by the Regional Council for the Unrecognized Villages with the help of very important and professional people like Oren Yiftachel and other mitachnenim, people who work in this field, okay? And they provide a road for like a solution for both issues, the land rights and the recognition of the Bedouin villages, but the government denied this alternative plan and is not able to listen or to accept any part of it, okay?
Were there any representatives from the Bedouins in the Power Committee or in the Goldberg Committee? Or?
In Power Committee there is no representative. In the Goldberg Committee there were 2 out of 7, and that was part of the people's anger on this committee, because this committee is supposed to deal mainly with the issues of the Bedouins, and it's supposed to have more people who are very, very knowledgeable about their problems and their situation, and also people who care about the Bedouins. So it's in the committee there were only 2. None of them was like affiliated with any of these NGOs that work with the rights of the Bedouins. Both of them came from what we call Zionist political parties. That means they were affiliated with the government interests rather than the Bedouin interests. That's why the report failed, and that's why the Bedouins did not accept it. So you are talking to yourself. The committee was talking to itself. It didn't talk to the people. It didn't listen to the people, and it didn't come with a real intention to make a compromise and to find some kind of solution. Yes.
Following up on Yoram's question, something I've never understood. Why is Israel being so obtuse or negative on this? Because it seems as if the argument is over a very small part of the Negev. It's not about sovereignty. Why is the Bedouin demands or the minimum ones so fiercely resisted on a policy or a political level?
I have to say that there is no right answer for this question, and you can get different answers from different people. From my perspective, the policies against or pro the Bedouins changed depends on the government and the political party who, for example, when left-wing governments were taking the construction office and the planning as a part of the construction office, they were more like willing to go toward the Bedouins and to recognize more villages for the Bedouins. That's how we got, for example, 10 villages recognized. Okay, it's
And
not
Ophir
during this
Pinespaz.
government. Huh?
Ophir Pinespaz was the minister at the time.
Yeah, it's not during this
In Yossi Sarin.
right-wing government. This is the first thing. The second thing, unfortunately, in recent years, especially with this right-wing government in Israel, people start to look at the Bedouins like not part of the state citizens. Many people in the government are like really very right-wing people who are trying to go back to very old slogans and ideologies like we have to save the land, we have to get the land, nobody should get this land, and the Bedouins, this is not the Bedouins' land because they don't have any title deeds, and all these kind of arguments that only like inflame the situation and make it unpleasant and damage the situation, especially the coexistence fabric between the Bedouins and the Negev and the Jews in the Negev, which has been like one of the good examples in the Negev for a long time. I know the answer wasn't like satisfying, but
it seems ideological
yes,
more than
mainly it's ideological. It's part of the ideology of the some of the Zionist parties that believe that the Bedouins should be maximum Bedouins should be in minimum areas, while maximum Jews should be spread around. It's ideological. It's sometimes go to security reasons. So you can start to see today in the Negev, they're trying to plant new towns between the Bedouins and the West Bank borders. They're trying to do different kind of planning that is not serving the Bedouin but serving different needs and different reasons.
That's all right.
So thank you very much, Morad. It was very enlightening, but I realized the big question is one that you can't answer. Why does this connect to? So thank you very much.